Good evening, wrestling fans. This is another alternative commentary. I am your host, the mandated reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified, Mr. Mark Radulich. And tonight, we are watching the 1992 Royal Rumble match. Yes, and I am joined by Ric Flair's superfan, Gavin Napier. How do you do, sir?
I'm doing well, much better now that our audio issues have been sorted and I can actually hear what you are saying.
It does help when we can hear each other. Makes for a better conversation.
Much.
So tomorrow is, as we're recording this, tomorrow is the Royal Rumble in St. Louis, as I believe. And so a while back, I had asked you, hey, if there's ever any kind of podcast you want to do, any topic, shoot me a list and we'll talk about them. And you had said, hey, I would love to do like a watch along for the Royal Rumble 1992. So just, 50 words or less, Gavin, why are we spending, other than the obvious, why did you want to talk about this? What's so special about this event for you?
The obvious is the Ric Flair win at the end of this. Spoilers, it's a 30-year-old event, if you weren't aware of this. Sorry. So this really was like the peak of my Ric Flair fandom. And that's kind of weird because he was always an NWA guy. I grew up on NWA and WCW. But to me, this is the greatest moment of his career. I also feel like this is the greatest Royal Rumble of all time, not just because of Ric Flair, but we'll touch on it as we watch along with it. The way that this match is put together should be the standard for all Royal Rumbles because there's no dead moments. There's no points where it feels like there's just filler in the ring. There are so many storylines that are woven together throughout this, and that's what makes a good Royal Rumble. It's not just the Final Four. It's not just the surprises. It's being able to tell multiple stories over the course of the hour while still building to that one ultimate story of who's going to win. I agree with that.
Yep. Our friend here on Twitch says this is the second greatest performances in Royal Rumble history, not just from Flair, but also from Heenan.
And that's a big part of it, is the commentary from this might be the greatest commentary for any match ever between Bobby Heenan and Gorilla Monsoon. I think this is the match you point to for Ric Flair's greatness. This is the match that you point to for the greatest commentary team of all time.
Indeed. All right, Gavin. Well, I don't want to waste any time here. And as you said, we can talk as the match is going on. So if you are playing the home game and want to watch along with us, we currently have this set at 1:22:15. I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, and then I'm going to press the button. That button is play. So ready? 1, 2, 3. There we go. And there is, if you're playing at home, there is Sid telling you to come hither and look into his crazy eyes.
And I was excited about Sid in this match as well. I mean, even with Flair and me just hoping and praying that Flair would win, the idea of Sid being the WWF champion would have thrilled me as well. I would have been disappointed over Flair not winning, but to me, Sid has the greatest look of anyone that's ever been in the sport. Now, obviously, what goes on in the ring may leave a little to be desired. But on pure look and presence, to me, Sid is as good as it gets.
Yeah, he definitely. I don't think I was ever a huge fan of the tight curly blonde hair, but that aside, I would agree with you. Sid always had great intensity. Sid had a great look. He had the height, he had the build, he had the charisma. I think maybe if he had some better some help with his promos at times. And maybe we do something with that hair. I think he'd have been like the total package. But, it's so funny. We have so many guys in the history of professional wrestling who just have everything. They are the perfect total package, but there's always something about them that just scurries the whole thing. Me, as you love Ric Flair and as you just talked about Sid, one of my favorites is the Ultimate Warrior. And like he had the look, he had everything. Again, in-ring talent, he definitely needed to be carried, but he was a guy you could hang your entire company on, and he just couldn't keep his crap together, And I've spent hours on this network, past, present, and future defending the man, so I won't go into it any further than that. But a lot of guys in this era, and it's such a rich era of professional wrestling in terms of like guys that had the right look, the presence, the talent. I mean, it'll be years later, maybe during the Attitude Era, before you'll have another roster as deep as this one, filled with almost anyone who could have been in the main event at any given time.
And I think that's another thing that makes this Royal Rumble so special is, I don't keep up with WWE anymore, so I don't even know who's in the Royal Rumble this year.
Right.
But I would imagine that if you are keeping up with the product, there's probably one or two people that you could realistically expect to win. Maybe it's because I was 12 years old. But to me, going into this 1992 Royal Rumble, realistic possibilities to win this and win the WWF Championship were Ric Flair, Hulk Hogan, Sid, Undertaker, Macho Man Randy Savage. They could have done something crazy and put the title on Roddy Piper. This was the only televised shot at the WWF World Heavyweight Championship that Jake the Snake Roberts ever got. So there were a realistic 6 or 7 people that could have won this match.
Right. And go ahead.
I would say that added layers and elements to the match that you don't get in the modern Rumbles.
So there was a Royal Rumble from a little over 10 years ago. I'm going to take a wild guess, depending on where I was in my life. It was probably 2008. And I remember going to a sports bar to watch the Rumble because, back in the day before, when we used to leave our houses and be social, we would go to, you would go to your sports bar and grill, and they would have the pay-per-view, and you could be amongst the other wrestling fans and have fun. I don't know about your sports bar, but there was always at least a handful of guys with their hands taped up and a belt over their shoulder, which was great fun. So I went there one year for the Royal Rumble, and they were like, we're taking bets on who's going to win. And I can't remember what all was going on that particular year, but I do remember it was really obvious who was going to win the Royal Rumble that year. It was like one or two people, and that was about it. But they were like, well, we're taking bets on this. And I'm like, I was encouraged to participate because that was what everyone was doing. But yeah, we all knew who was winning that year. But you're right. This one was wide open. And what a treat to have put, as we're going to see at the end, to put it on Ric Flair. And I made the graphic for tonight's show. I didn't want to just put up the poster because Ric Flair's post promo win is iconic.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not the world's biggest Ric Flair fan. That's why you're here. But I will, give the devil his due. His and we'll watch it soon enough when he has that title and he's there with Perfect and Heenan and there's champagne everywhere and he's like with a tear in my eye, yada yada yada. Like I said this last night. There are moments in wrestling that make you forget that it's phony baloney. Yeah. You really do believe what you're watching is real. You have bought into it hook, line, and sinker. And that was one of those moments. It's why it's iconic. It's why it's the one everyone references. It's why we love it.
And I think the reason that this one seemed more real and not just a scripted promo is because it was more real. This is Ric Flair after leaving WCW, after leaving the place that he had made himself famous and a main event star and a legend in the sport, because of disagreement with management and because management no longer believed in Ric Flair.
Right.
And nobody wanted to pony up for the deposit on the belt that Ric Flair carried, so he showed up carrying the big gold. That led to some lawsuits and so on and so forth. But for Ric Flair to be the champion of the chief rival of the NWA/WCW and be able to hold up their world title, it was very much akin to Roger Clemens going to the Toronto Blue Jays after the general manager of the Boston Red Sox said that he was washed up and didn't have anything left. Roger Clemens would go on to pitch for another 15 years after that. And we know Ric Flair, if you offered him the right paycheck to cover some of his alimony and child support, he would probably get in the ring tomorrow.
Sure.
But for him, this was his opportunity to extend a middle finger to the company that didn't believe in him anymore. And so there was a lot of real emotion in that promo, even though it's a scripted win. And we all know that plan scripted, laid out, whatever.
He
There was
seemed
real
he
emotion in
seemed
it.
genuinely happy to have that win.
Sure,
You know,
absolutely.
he clearly wasn't surprised by it, but that's what makes it even more of a great experience, both watching it and watching him, because like you really do feel through the TV set he is conveying how grateful he is to have had this opportunity. And it's like, dude, you toured the world as the NWA World Champion against like Dusty Rhodes and the Road Warriors, and I can't remember if this is before or after Ricky Steamboat, but my God, like you've had. If he had retired in 1992, he'd had, you know, a Hall of Fame career anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he's still like, oh my God, like you believe in me, you love me. You know, he had that like, what was it, Audrey Hepburn, I think, moment. It's like, you like me, you really like me. And it's great. So as we begin the Royal Rumble here, our first entrant is the British Bulldog.
And I'm gonna have to play catch up because Chrome just crashed on me. So
okay.
But I remember this well enough. Don't hit pause. We'll proceed.
Yes, sir.
You got the Bulldog coming out in full regalia. It was my favorite look for the Bulldog, as stupid as the braids and the beads were.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely my favorite look for the Bulldog, especially with the big cape that came along with it. And I remember watching this with friends who were huge Hulkamaniacs.
Mm-hmm.
And they were all telling me, Flair's coming out number 2. He's going to have to go the whole way. Flair's coming out number 2. And I was like, if he does, that's fine. But Flair does not come out number 2.
No. Coming out right now with the sensational Sherry is the $1 Million Man. Everyone's got a price for the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase.
And again, here's another guy, even though he's coming out at number 2, one of the first 2 in the ring. While this is past his true main event run in the late 80s, and he's certainly on the downhill for his WWF career, you could have put the belt on Ted DiBiase and it would have been credible.
Yeah. That, you know, it was one of the things that Pat and I have been chronicling as we go through the Mania of WrestleMania series is for a long stretch there, you had the all-star team of worldwide professional wrestling outside of maybe one or two guys.
Yeah.
You know, you had almost every single main event talent from all the territories around the continental United States. It's a crazy roster from like 85 to 89.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why another reason for this to be so high on my list, I truly believe that in one match at any given time, this is the greatest collection of talent in wrestling history.
For sure. Just to let you know, and now I like this one. I was not unhappy when you were like 92 Royal Rumble. I'm like, oh, that's a classic. I also like the 98 Rumble. Stuart and I talked about that one on Wednesday's or Thursday's episode of the Mania of WrestleMania. And you know, look, Mick Foley coming in 3 times as 3 different characters. You know, Austin's historic win to go into WrestleMania 14. There's a lot happening on that show. It's a fun one.
The Royal Rumble is the one thing that I always make it a point to watch.
Mm-hmm.
I may not watch it live tomorrow, but at some point in the very near future, I will be caught up and I'll watch the Royal Rumble because it's fun no matter where you're at in your fandom.
Yeah.
The nature of the event and knowing that there's going to be some surprises. There's going to be some people that you haven't seen for a while.
Yep.
And it really is an opportunity for them to elevate and build a new star out of nowhere, even if they don't win the match, getting the Diesel push.
Right.
In this match, The Undertaker, I felt like, gets elevated even though he doesn't win.
We are at number 3 here in the Royal Rumble, and the man, Ric Flair has entered the ring as Ted DiBiase was unceremoniously dumped out.
Bobby Heenan is losing his mind. Gorilla Monsoon is telling him it's all over for you, pal. And so begins the greatest 60 minutes of commentary in professional wrestling history.
You know, I got to give it to you, Gavin. I'm watching Ric Flair, and look, he's not my favorite wrestler by a long shot, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you that there are not some phenomenal things he does in that ring. And I don't mean like phenomenal, like Daniel Bryan, like, oh, he's this like, stellar worker. The selling that Ric Flair does, the little nuances in his character work. Like he starts to square up with British Bulldog, and the first thing he does is straighten his hair. It's hilarious. Little things like that is what make him so great.
And as we go through, we're going to see a lot of those little things, the facial expressions. We're going to see the little things that Rick does to add depth and character to even a match like this. Give me a time cue to sync up with here, Mark.
Sure. We are currently at 134.27.
Okay, great.
As we see the number 4 contestant here in the Royal Rumble, and it's one of the Nasty Boys, the not blonde one.
Yeah, this would be Jerry Sags. This would be the better of the two from an in-ring perspective. And you're right, this isn't fair to Flair. I agree wholeheartedly. The Nasty Boys might be my all-time least favorite big-time tag team. Absolutely hated them. Never liked them.
Growing up as a kid watching this, I'm born 76, so I was I was at the right age for the 80s boom. And I think we're around the same age. And I remember that color scheme, like the throne paint look and the neon and everything. And then I remember, that was a big part of like the 80s aesthetic.
Oh,
and then the Nasty Boys come out wearing it. And I just remember thinking to myself as a kid, like, ugh, I hate this. What?
Even in the AWA,
mm-hmm.
I had no tolerance for them. And at that point, I'm like 7 or 8 years old. And I just thought, these guys are just fat slobs. This isn't believable at all.
And that's the thing. Like we had, if you're like me, you like, other than Dusty Rhodes, like you grow up with all these like giant muscular He-Man gods. Right. And how come these two fat, toothless, meth look, using slobs, like you said, and you're like, well, how did these guys become professional wrestlers?
And I think that's what frustrated me, because Dusty had that undeniable presence. He had that undeniable charisma. The Nasty Boys did not have that.
No.
The Nasty Boys did not have what Dusty Rhodes had.
I feel like the Nasty Boys were a collection of like the worst wrestling stereotypes.
But they were well connected. And who is sometimes more important than what most of the time. It's more
sometimes.
Yeah, most of the time, if not a universal thing. But
just thinking, if you're Pat Patterson and you're talking to Ric Flair, like, okay, you're going to come out as number 3. All right, what am I doing for the first couple of minutes? The Bulldog's going to kick the crap out of you.
Yep, there's going to be some press slams. You're going to take some big bumps right off the top. And then Jerry Sags is going to come out. Thanks, Pat.
The best thing about the Nasty Boys, our friends on Twitch here chiming in as we go along, which is great. We encourage that. If you're listening on social media, if you're following us on Twitter and you want to jump in, find us on Twitch or YouTube and jump in the comment section. I'll put them up here. We'll have fun. Our friend here on Twitch says the best thing about the Nasty Boys were Jimmy Hart's jackets and Missy Hyatt. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and say anytime Missy Hyatt was around, it was the best thing going on in wrestling. I like the Goyles, Gavin. I like the Goyles.
I never could buy into the Nasty Boys being competitive with the Steiners. It didn't resonate with me, and so. But as filler for number 4 in the Royal Rumble, sure, why not?
Yeah. So number 5 here is Haku, legit badass. One of the few men on earth where if it's like, he's coming after me, I'm leaving. I'm done.
And I didn't understand it at the time, but looking back now, if they put the belt on Haku, okay.
Yeah, Pat and I played around with the idea of like a Haku, like a legit long-term Haku Ultimate Warrior feud when he was the champion. You frame Haku right and give him some opportunities. He would have been a hell of a talent. I think he would have been a hell of like a main event heel.
And I love how every time, because the lines are blurred so much now with tweeners, faces, heels. Kayfabe is dead. It's been dead for a decade or more. But again, the clearly defined heel and babyface roles in this match, the fact that Bobby Heenan was excited that Haku was coming to the ring because that's help for Ric Flair. as
Right.
if Haku wasn't going to try to win the match himself. It's just help for Rick.
So if you're watching like the first couple of minutes of this event, you could be led to believe that the Bulldog is going to end up winning this thing. He is tearing through everybody. He just eliminated Haku, and in comes in a freshly healed Shawn Michaels, who had tossed his best friend and tag team partner, poor Marty Jannetty, through the barbershop window.
That is absolutely untrue, Mark. Marty dove through the window to get away from Shawn.
Oh, I see. Thank you, Bobby. So Shawn Michaels here beginning his long journey to the main event here in 1992. Now, later in the summer of 92 is where they do SummerSlam in England, right? With Brett and the Bulldog. Okay.
Yeah, Wembley. Big Wembley.
Yeah, that's I tell you what, that's one of the ones I have a lot of fond memories of. That main event between Brett and Bulldog is something else.
Yeah. And to hear Brett tell it, it was all because of him.
Sure.
Because Davey Boy was stoned out of his gourd and didn't know where he was, so Brett just wrestled the whole match himself against himself and gave Davey Boy his shining moment.
The thing about Brett is that he's humble.
Right.
And, he's very giving.
And if you don't believe him, just ask.
Yeah. So anyway, one of the things that I'm noticing as I watch this, we have somebody like the British Bulldog who they're clearly giving a big push to here. And he has this great look and everything, and he's going to get this huge push in the summer, and then the steroid trial, and he's gone.
Yep.
Like, you want to talk about a company who, in an era of if there were nothing but bad, if it wasn't for bad luck, they'd have no luck at all.
Yeah, and honestly, it didn't end up being a terrible thing for his career because it's not long after this. I mean, you're looking at a little under a year. No, it'd be a little over a year. It'd be 93 into 94. He's feuding with Big Van Vader in the main event for WCW.
Yep. And he's dealing with midgets on the beach.
Yeah. Evil midgets.
Evil midgets. I wish someone had loved me as much as Brett loves Brett. No fooling. Ain't that the truth?
That's not possible. Nobody loves anybody as much.
If you can find someone that you're attracted to who loves you as much as Brett loves Brett, don't lose that person. Hold on to him forever. And we see Tito Santana, old Chico, as Ventura used to call him, in his El Matador outfit.
And there would have been a time that Tito would have been believable as a contender for this, but that time had passed.
Yeah.
But he still comes in with history and credibility for this audience because he's coming in as a former Intercontinental Champion, a former multiple-time World Tag Team Champion.
He's on that list of like WrestleMania All-Stars. He's on like the first like 5 or 6 of them solid.
Yeah.
And he's in like halfway decent matches too. Like him and I joked with Pat, him and Greg Valentine are the hardest working men in WrestleMania history.
Absolutely. But Tito was in his day and in his era was a great hand. He was a great number 2 babyface behind Hogan for several years. And he even got that weird Survivor Series push where it was him and Hogan against like 9 heels, and of course they won. But El Matador, kind of a silly gimmick, their attempt to give Tito a little personality and keep him hanging around. Mm-hmm. But he's one of the few that's not a threat to win this. And same for Shawn Michaels at this point. You can see the beginnings of what Shawn Michaels will be here. But he was nowhere near ready for the World Championship yet. And
here comes the Barbarian. Big slab of beef.
Now, this was when Barbarian was in his, he looked like a He-Man villain phase.
Yeah.
This was not imitation Road Warrior Barbarian. This was animal pelts and antlers Barbarian.
Kind of miss those days.
I mean, it's believable.
Yeah.
I could see Barbarian stomping off into the woods. And
I want to amend that statement. I miss the days where a guy who looked that way would dress that way, not guys who look like they're in Renaissance Fair cosplay.
Right. Yeah, absolutely correct. And I think it's one of the things that's neat watching this. It's the first time I've watched this in a while, and I really considered watching this to brush up on it before we sat down to watch it. I thought, okay. This is probably the 13th or 14th time I've watched this match, but seeing Joey Marella around ringside is cool. I always liked him as a referee when I was a kid. I always thought that he was entertaining as a referee, and tragically lost his life in a car accident. But that was Gorilla Monsoon's son, and I would imagine that he probably would have been a very long-term fixture for the WWF if not for the car accident.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that. I didn't say it when it was happening because we were still just kind of introing the whole thing that we're doing tonight. But so Jack Tunney gets in the ring to hold up the belt and say, this whole Survivor Series, this whole Royal Rumble is for the World Heavyweight Championship. And I was thinking, like, I never knew at the time because I was a little kid, and how would I know? But, you know, Jack Tunney would occasionally show up. Like, he dealt with the whole Hogan Andre thing when Andre surrendered the title to Mr. DiBiase. That whole bit. And I was like, do they just have this guy on payroll to occasionally come out and give monotone speeches?
Yes.
And then you know the history of it, and you're like, oh, yeah, they keep him around because they took in his territory and he got a job for life.
Yep. Yeah, the history of how these guys get their on-camera roles is always interesting to me.
Right, like Gorilla Monsoon, who I think had owned a piece of it when Vince's father owned the territory, and he, you know, and when Vince took over, it was like, well, I'll take care of you forever, and he did. Yep. I mean, you know, I don't think Gorilla Monsoon ever had like a complaint about, you know, other than maybe some of this looked a little silly to his eyes. I mean, he had a cake job, and here we see another missed opportunity, another tragic story in the world of wrestling. The old Texas Tornado, Kerry Von Erich.
And this is where you start to see some of the fun stuff with Ric Flair playing into the match, because there's a history between Flair and Kerry. They feuded when Kerry was in World Class and Rick was NWA champion. Kerry got the NWA title win at the David Von Erich Memorial Parade of Champions. They had to take the belt off of him immediately because he was showing up in no condition to work. Imagine that. But there's history between Rick and Kerry. And so for people that have paid attention over the last 10 years, it's a neat thing to see these guys that feuded almost 10 years ago starting to interact again.
You know, it's fun to play the what if game. Yesterday we were talking about what if Austin never came back after the neck injury that he got from Owen at SummerSlam, you know, and Brett's going to go and Sean's about to break his back. What do you do? And we were like, well, what if the Austin of that time ended up being Ken Shamrock? There's so many what ifs here. What if there were no drugs and Kerry Von Erich was like sober the whole time? You know,
what if even if Kerry Von Erich was on drugs but didn't lose a foot? Right.
Yeah. You know, there's so many guys in here, like we were talking about at the top of the show, that could have, you know, let's stay with the Warrior, can't keep his crap together and he has to go. There's so many, like 4, 5, 6 guys deep you could have ran with. Yeah. Could you imagine Kerry Von Erich as the WWE champion in a world where he has 2 feet and a straight brain?
Yeah, I mean, when you watch the original World Class stuff from back in the early 80s, Kerry was definitely ahead of his time because he was one of the first true body guys.
Right.
Very limited move set, was never a great worker, but he had that presence, he had that look, he had something that the fans were drawn to. And a healthy and sober Kerry could have gone down as one of the all-time greats.
So I have to be in 10th grade when this is happening. This is January of 92, and I'm born 76. And I don't think I'm watching wrestling as much in high school, probably here and there. I definitely didn't see this live. But I remember being very much 50-50 on the WWF at the time, because it was like, yeah, there's guys like Kerry Von Erich, and there's guys like Sid in there, and the Bulldog, and these, you know, people who look like wrestlers from when I first started watching wrestling. And then there's guys like the Repo Man. And I'm like, ugh, I can't even with your stupid characters and your clowns and your nonsense. You'd have been like, it's so funny because I say that, like, you would think that I would have been a huge fan of like the NWA and WCW, but I grew up in New York.
You know? Yeah, that's fair. And Barry Darsow just had a string of terrible gimmicks. The guy had one good gimmick in his career. And that was Smash of Demolition.
Yeah. Oh my God.
everything.
Can I tell you how much I love Demolition, Gavin? They were the best thing ever. Like, I go on and on and on about the Ultimate Warrior. Here he is, the true MVP of the WWF, the Hall of Famer, the Hammer, Greg the Hammer Valentine.
And Valentine and Flair had history, and I would imagine that almost nobody watching this match had any idea about it, because I certainly didn't when I was 12 years old.
They did. They went around the horn in Mid-Atlantic, didn't they?
They did. They had a feud over the United States Championship. They've been tag team partners. There's a lot of history there, and in many ways, Greg Valentine is like the Dollar General Ric Flair. They both used the figure four. They both threw the chops. They both wore the silly robes. They both had the long hair. Flair obviously a little more charismatic than Greg Valentine.
Not for nothing, but Greg Valentine could have passed as Ric Flair's body double in a movie.
His stunt double.
Yes.
I didn't say that I wasn't a fan of the Mr. Hole-in-One gimmick. It's just acknowledging that it was stupid. I'm okay with an angry golfer. I'm just not going to pretend it was good.
Well, the Battle Royal here, the Royal Rumble is filling up with guys. We've got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I think, in here right now. Oh, and dude, Shawn Michaels loves the near elimination spots that he gets to do in this.
Yes,
like he's such a smaller guy, especially in this era. And so he does his job. He gets knocked around and throws himself hither and yon over the top rope, and then he gets to show off how athletic he is and how much younger he is than a lot of these guys by like hanging on the ropes in awkward ways. He is kind of I'm going to do this kind of in reverse, but follow me here. He's kind of like the Kofi Kingston of this era.
Yeah.
He's the guy doing the crazy bumps in here because what else is he going to do?
Right.
Oh, and here another Hall of Famer, Nikolai Volkov.
Yeah, Nikolai, not somebody that was going to win this match.
Hey, he contended for the WWF Heavyweight Championship on Saturday night's main event, I'll have you know.
He did. He was an evil Russian and former tag team champion with the Iron Sheik because, it was the 80s and you had a Russian and an Iranian, so why wouldn't they be the evil heel champions?
Sure.
Nikolai certainly had his value at different points in WWF history, but at this point, his career is almost coming to an end. So he gets one last moment in the spotlight. He's working as a babyface, which is not terribly natural for him. And soon he would be working for the city of Baltimore and farting a lot.
The thing I liked about, like Nikolai Volkov is, and I talked to Pat about this on our Mania of WrestleMania series. This is an era of guys who either really couldn't and didn't last long and really couldn't understand the way WWF was changing and doing things, and guys who got it instantly.
Yep.
And probably had their careers were longer in the spotlight. And Nikolai Volkov was one of those guys. Like, he got it.
Yeah.
Like you look at him, you don't think he looks like much, and and it's not like he probably sold like tons of merch, or whatever. But like, he understood, I'm a cartoon character now. Yeah. And good on him for figuring it out and leaning into it.
And same for Tito. Tito probably adds 3 or 4 years to his career just by being willing to wear ridiculous pants and pretending to be a bullfighter.
Yeah, and go shoot vignettes where he's like, I have to work on my speed and I need to be a better wrestler, so I'm going to be a bullfighter.
Yeah.
Okay, Tito.
Sure. And Barry Darso, who was willing to do anything for money.
Here he comes, the true main eventer, Mr. Money himself, the big boss man. So I don't know if you got a chance to hear me and my son do the beach break. No, sorry. I told this story, but this wasn't on air. We watched a little bit of some of the WrestleManias that we talked about, 14, 15, and 16. And I showed him the boss man being hung in the Hell in the Cell. And then I told him the story about Pepper Steak. My son hates the big boss man now. I mean, he's dead. It doesn't really matter. But he's like, my son was like wanting to find the big boss man and beat the crap out of him for hurting a poor dog.
If I'm not mistaken, it's this Royal Rumble where the boss man almost dies when he gets eliminated. So
Okay.
we'll have to keep an eye out for that.
Okay, well, he just tossed out Barry Darsow like a sack of crap, and I gotta love Barry Darsow. He gets thrown out and then still looks around like he's trying to repo something.
Yeah, he's still sneaking around and being the character.
Never loses character. God bless him. See, guys like right now in the WWE could really learn from some of this.
Oh, they absolutely could. And you mentioned Shawn Michaels being a little younger than everybody in this match and sort of being the new kid on the block. Give you a little bit of perspective on age and how that works. I do believe that AJ Styles right now is either the same age or 1 year older than Ric Flair was in this Royal Rumble.
Yes, J Rock. I did, J Royce. I did tell my son about Big Boss Man's late 90s, early 2000s greatest hits, including stealing a dead body in a casket and having Big Show jump on it, Benny Hill style. We went through all of it.
And I loved Boss Man. I loved him when he was Big Bubba, but he really found himself in this character.
Yeah, I mean, Christ, him and Hogan, that's why I said Mr. Money. Like, him and Hogan made crap tons of money going around the horn.
And honestly, Boss Man is one of those guys who was better fat. Once he lost weight, he wasn't the same guy. And I don't know if it's because it was just less spectacular, but seeing him move the way that he moved when he was up around 330, 340, like he was here, he did some incredibly impressive things in the wrestling.
Dude, when he was with Akeem and they were the Twin Towers and they would hit their like sidewalk slam and stuff, you could visibly see the ring move.
Yeah.
I mean, yeesh. Like Andre didn't move the ring like that, and Andre is a zillion pounds and 10 feet high. Well, okay, a lot of guys got cleared out because I blinked and I was talking to you, and I know Flair dumped the Bulldog. Tito must have been dumped. Sean must have been dumped because Kerry's gone. Because all we got in there now is Flair, Barbarian, and out goes the Barbarian. Flair, Barbarian, Boss Man, and whoever that was that just went out with the Boss Man.
Give me a time code so I make sure I can stay close to her. I'm starting and stopping on my agent laptop here.
Yeah, we're at 156.04.
Okay, I'm not far off. I'm only a couple of seconds behind.
I honestly, whoever had power on the back of his ass, I could not tell who that was.
That was Hercules.
Oh, that was Hercules?
Power and Glory.
The Hercules?
Hercules.
Like that's near father-in-law Hercules?
Yes.
Okay. I miss old Hercules then. Woo! Okay. Oh my God. Yeah, if that's what you're talking about, yeah, he took that bad.
It didn't go well.
Bossman threw himself, like hung himself on the top rope. I guess this would be a thing with Bossman hanging himself. Hang on. Anywho. And then like he flipped over the rope and he caught his neck on the way out. Like, oh.
Yeah, it wasn't good. It was troubling as a 12-year-old. Is he okay? But before he got eliminated, you got to see him do some of his cool boss man stuff, that big high kick followed by the sharp uppercut. And, the crowd believed in him. The crowd was behind him. And I think boss man as world champ might have been a stretch right here, but the crowd was certainly buying into everything that he did.
And here we go. A main event anywhere in Portland. Roddy Piper versus Ric Flair.
Well, and the history between these two is incredibly well established and would go on for years and years after this. But this was Piper pulling double duty. He had won the Intercontinental title from the Mountie earlier in the show.
Did you know that the Mountie was brave and strong? He was the Mountie and he enforces the law.
Not only was he brave and strong, he was handsome.
That's right.
But that was the first and only title that Roddy held in the WWF until many years later, when he and Rick would win the tag team titles briefly. But it was a good spot. The ring had cleared out. Flair had a chance for just a short breather, and Bobby is telling you rest, recover, just get yourself together, and then the absolute worst possible person comes through the curtain for Rick.
Yeah, that's storytelling, baby. And Piper puts Ric Flair in the sleeper hold. it's a look. There's a lot of modern wrestling that I can certainly appreciate. I mean, I'm kind of like you. Even when my son and I watched Beach Break, I had to say on air, like, I haven't watched Dynamite in weeks. And I never watch Raw anymore. Like, I tend to watch just the big events, and that's about it. But I'll tell you, looking back on this, I was like, gosh, they don't make them like this anymore.
No, they really don't. And nostalgia is undefeated.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure with your area of expertise in your profession, you understand this and are aware of this. But at the time that we were watching this, the dopamine centers in our idiot little brains were just going crazy.
Oh, yeah.
And so, these are the best memories and the strongest associations that our brains would form. And so it's always going to seem better to us than it actually was. At the same time, from a very objective place, they really don't do Royal Rumbles like this anymore. There's no multi-layered storytelling. There's no half dozen credible, believable winners. There's no air of suspense. It's just, how are we going to get to the point where Batista wins?
A few years from now, a fat Samoan and two midgets are going to dance in the ring and stop the Royal Rumble cold. Yeah, it changes over time. I get it. Anyway, Jake the Snake is entered. Hi, I'm Snarky McSnarkiston. Jake the Snake has entered the ring, and now we've got Roddy Piper in there, Ric Flair, and Jake the Snake. Oof. That's a match in and of itself.
It is. And again, it's the only televised shot that Jake ever got at the WWF World Heavyweight Championship. And I'm sure that there were people out there that were pulling for Jake to win this, and nobody would have been upset if he did, because you play the what if game. I don't think there's anything that's very much more fascinating than the idea of a prime heel Jake the Snake Roberts as WWF World Champion.
Yeah, I'm bummed we never got like a lengthy Jake Ultimate Warrior run. It's God, if I take a drink every time I bring up a missed opportunity because people were either crazy on drugs or quit the company or whatever.
Right.
Here comes Hacksaw. Let me tell you, I never loved Hacksaw. I know he was like a crowd favorite or whatever. This was kind of like the Nasty Boys, where like I remember watching him as a kid and going, "Who is this this?" I gotta stop myself. Who is this? Who is this dopey looking fella? And like Pat would hit me to the jazz years later. We would start talking about Mid-South, and what a killer he was there, as was Ted, as was so many guys that came up in this era in the WWE. But he's another one who, like you said, he was a killer in Mid-South, and then he comes here and he's a cartoon character. And like I don't begrudge him his career; he got a longer career than he might have ever had by doing that. But again, I was a little kid who, when I watched wrestling, I favored the big muscular bodies and the tan skin and these guys that look like gods. And here was a guy who looked like my neighbor with the dogs that barked. That's right. So what I'm hearing is Mark was anti-American. That's right. I was a progressive liberal panty waist tree hugger, and I loved communism. Sure.
I think the appeal to Jake was he was so different in his delivery than everyone else.
Jake or what's his face there?
Hacksaw. No, I think Jake was very different in his delivery, and I think that's what set him apart, even playing the cartoon character. And then Hacksaw, he was a killer in Mid-South, but he had a babyface run in Mid-South as well. And at this point, he's playing with house money. He's been caught traveling with cocaine and breaking kayfabe, and I mean, this was a revival of sorts for him. And he did it well. Hacksaw at this point had kind of moved into the Tito spot from a few years earlier, where he could be buddies with Hulk. He could take on the number 2 heel. He didn't have to win a title, and the fans were going to get behind him, and they're going to sell a whole lot of foam 2x4s.
To Jay Royce's point, he carried a 2x4 and yelled, "I love America." Yeah, he had fans.
Yeah,
it's pretty easy. So I'm gonna be a complete hypocrite here and say I used to love IRS. Like, if there was one guy who got to have a second job in the WWF at the time and be a silly gimmick, it was good old gosh, I can't remember his real name now.
Mike Rotundo.
Mike Rotunda as this IRA. He played it so well, and he, like, watching him in his varsity club gimmick and all of that. Like, you would think he's like such a stiff and lacking in personality, but for whatever reason, whatever personality he does have works so well in that IRS character.
Well, and this is his second run in the WWF because he and Barry Windham were World Tag Team Champions as the U.S. Express. So another guy with a lot of history and a lot of credibility, even though the gimmick that he's in right now is a little bit silly. And, you know, roughly 30 years later, we're waiting to see where his son is going to pop up next.
Yes, I wait with bated breath.
Honestly, it'll probably be a YouTube video or direct to Netflix movie. But eventually, he's going to make his way back.
I think Jim Cornette said, like, why didn't he just go? Like, him and Alexa Bliss, just go to Hollywood already. That's clearly where you want to be.
Yeah. And, you know, listening to one of the Conrad Thompson podcasts earlier today as I was driving to work, he made a good point about Bray not showing up in AEW yet. AEW just had a half dozen big-time debuts.
Yeah.
There's no reason to show up right now because you're just going to be lost in the crowd and forgotten.
Yeah, so, like, who are you going to wrestle with? Daniel Bryan, who just got there, Adam Cole, who just got there, half of the Undisputed Attitude, who just got there, Jay Lethal, I was going to say Jay Lethal, who just got there and isn't being used. Like, the writing's on the wall. They're a little full right now.
And I think what you're going to see is they've already started to mention that there's a lot of contracts that are coming due in AEW that are not going to be renewed. Right. So that roster is going to start to thin out a little bit and give them some breathing room.
I hope Joey Janela held on to his money. That's all I'm going to say. Enjoy your 2-day spring break this year at WrestleMania.
I'm just going to guess that he probably didn't. But and look, we just went through all of this, and we're overlooking the biggest debut of them all in AEW. Love that Danhausen.
Yes, as I said to my son, Danhausen! Danhausen! And my son went, who the hell is Danhausen? Why are you screaming? I'm 8. So anyway, Jimmy Snuka, who murdered a woman, is heading into the ring.
Yes. And again, more history with Ric Flair. Mid-Atlantic days, feud for the United States title. But yeah, he did murder a woman. It did get covered up by the WWF.
It's nice to have money and powerful friends.
Hey, I wonder why Tamina has a job.
So that was just real quick, because we really should focus on the match at hand and not various other wrestling news. But, you know, did anyone bat an eye when Nia Jax, like, you know, was like, I'm never going to wrestle again? And was the expectation to be like, no, not Nia Jax in her hole. Come back, Nia. Please injure more women.
We need a few more people to have that attitude of I'm never going to wrestle again, but I digress.
Speaking of which, here comes the dead man, the Undertaker. Stu and I talked about how our favorite iteration of the Undertaker is Ministry of Darkness. Coolest music. He was a really fully formed character, because one of the things we said, this is the era where the Undertaker is still an attraction, and he's an attraction for a very long time.
Yes. Yeah, he's a zombie.
Mm-hmm.
And he is the reason that this match is taking place, because you've got the whole thing where Undertaker tombstoned Hulk Hogan on a chair at Tuesday in Texas that Ric Flair provided, and then Hulk gets the belt back through nefarious means or something. I don't know. Pat could tell you the details. I've forgotten a lot of the details around it. I just remember Undertaker won the belt, then he didn't have it, and then this happened.
Yeah.
So,
well, they were we covered this on the Mania of WrestleMania, where they were experimenting with Tuesday pay-per-views. It didn't go well. Also, that has to be one of my favorite interference moments of all time, is Ric Flair daintily sliding a chair in there.
Yes.
Just very nonchalant, like, and, you know, the Undertaker hits the tombstone on Hogan, and then right back out again, like he's a little magician.
I will say hitting the tombstone might be a little generous. Hulk's head was about 4 feet off the ground, but
you got to take care of the Hulkster.
Yeah, you gotta take care of the cash cow.
Yeah.
One of my favorite moments of Undertaker in this Rumble, we'll see it before too long here, is this is in the era where he's not selling anything.
Right.
You could light his arm on fire and he's just going to stare ahead and keep plodding towards you like the monster movie villain.
Right.
But there is a moment where Rick rears back and chops him, and you just get just the tiniest bit of a flinch from him, like, Jesus, that hurt.
And here comes Savage, I thought he was about ready to murder Ric Flair. Have they done the bit yet with Ric Flair saying that Liz
was mine before she was yours?
Yeah.
No, that's coming up between Rumble and WrestleMania.
Okay.
That'll lead into WrestleMania 8 between
those
two.
I thought. Okay.
Yeah. No, here he's still dealing with Snake Roberts ruined my wedding.
The greatest wrestling wedding ever. Have a piece of cake. Ah, it's a snake.
I don't know. I know that you're familiar with Black Machismo, but I don't know if you've ever heard that particular promo where Jay Lethal just blurts out, "Snake Roberts ruined my wedding." One of the greatest moments in TNA history.
I was very much in and out on TNA during the Jay Lethal Randy Savage times.
I'll see if I can track that promo down
and
send it, because he made other weird references like to George the Animal Steel and Tito Santana. But when he screamed "Snake Roberts ruined my wedding," perfect.
Well, it looks like Savage and Jake are both out. The Undertaker is now beating on Savage on the outside.
Yeah, the Jake and Undertaker pairing I thought was good for the Undertaker. It gave him a little something other than Paul Bearer moaning wildly. And it gave him someone to help carry the load in tag team matches, because Undertaker was not the guy that you wanted to work for 15 or 20 minutes at this point.
No.
It's debatable whether you wanted him to at any point, but especially here.
Well, like I said, being kind and fair to the Undertaker, we are in an era here where the less you saw him, the better. It worked better for his character. Years later, when he's a biker and he's basically what what Austin would say about himself. This is just me turned up to 11, and this is Mark Calloway turned up to 11. Yeah, then it didn't matter if he came out every week and killed Jeff Hardy, killed him dead,
and Maven.
Yes, somebody mentioned a Royal Rumble spot where someone just gets obliterated, and I was thinking to myself, like, no, the one I remember is Maven going into the popcorn machine.
Yes. And then Undertaker eating popcorn that may or may not have had blood on it.
Well, blood makes it taste better. Anyway, that face on the Undertaker. Like he's surprised he's doing it when he's doing.
He knows he doesn't belong here.
He has got to be thinking to himself. He was like, I can't believe 5 minutes ago I was on WCW TV.
And in Suburban Commando with a squeaky voice.
Yes. So, friend here on Twitch says, fun fact, the last guy Paul Bearer managed before his passing is LA Knight. Interesting.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
So was that as Paul Bearer, or was that as Percival Pringle III, or just William Moody? Or
hang on, I got to tell you a real quick personal thing. So we all know, if you've listened to any of my podcasts, I used to work for Rob Black's XPW. I worked in marketing for his porn company, and then I trained to be a wrestler, and I was on the shows, et cetera, et cetera. I was a character on the XPW television. And I knew Chris Cross personally, Chris Kloss, who was the ring announcer, who they were basically trying to make like low rent Joey Styles. He used to do the best Berserker impressions. Like, and he would break it up
about him.
He would break it up mid-conversation, man. He would be like, so Chris, man, after we're done breaking down this ring, we're going to go get Denny's, and he would go, Husk! And I'm like, oh Jesus.
So if you want to see someone that's carrying on the proud tradition of the Husk exclamations, Beastman in MLW. He's a recent signee to MLW. Mark, I think he'd be right up your alley.
Okay.
He's a guy that I've known from the West Virginia independent scene for several years. Great guy. So happy that he's getting a break. But he recently upgraded his gear for MLW, and it looks fantastic. I'll send you some pictures.
The guy that's the current champion over at MLW, if I can't remember his name.
Hammerstone.
Hammerstone. Yeah, I wanted to say Hardcastle. I'm like, no, that's not. I know that's not right. Yeah, Hammerstone. Oof! Somebody wake up and sign him. He is money. He has got the look, man.
WWE turned him down multiple times.
Really?
And okay, Percy Pringle, man, and Sean Ricker, the now LA Knight. Very cool. Paul Bearer actually managed one of my good friends, Chance Prophet, on the independent scene a few times as well.
I remember you talking about Chance Prophet back in our Casual Hero days.
Yep. He's still doing his thing, man. He's still out there making towns on the weekends and training guys to be wrestlers.
Here comes Mr. Meat Sauce. Good old Virgil.
But Hammerstone, he got turned down a couple times, and he actually just re-upped with MLW for like a multi-year deal.
Okay.
And on his Twitter, he talks about how steroids are good for you. So that's probably going to keep him away from WWE for the foreseeable future. But man, he's got the look. You got that right.
So I don't know if you know this or not, but Virgil was actually the one that came up with the Montreal screw job.
I believe it.
Sure.
Yeah. Just ask Virgil if you don't believe him.
Virgil is like the watcher of the WWE. He has been everywhere and a part of every story.
So do you follow Virgil on Twitter at all?
I used to. I don't know if I do anymore. I know that like when he was part of like the cultural zeitgeist there with with the Olive Garden remarks and everything, the breadsticks and the meat sauce and all, and the F money and all that. I kind of followed him because I thought he was hilarious for 5 minutes, and then I don't think I followed him anymore.
I have often found myself wondering as I read the tweets from Virgil, are these really from Virgil? Because Virgil just doesn't strike me as a guy that's quick enough to give us that type of satire.
Well, he isn't right now. Piper just kicked him so hard in the face. He's not tweeting anything. He may be seeing little birdies flying around his head, but he doesn't tweet nothing.
And maybe I'm selling Mike Jones short, but that type of capacity for satire just doesn't seem like something that would come from him.
I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt because when you have nothing to do but sit around all day and think about crap, you can probably come up with a half a dozen fairly funny tweets. Speaking of a guy who I do follow on Twitter, here comes the Sheik baby.
Sheiky baby.
Doing the bushwhacker walk for some reason. My favorite Iron Sheik moment is the gimmick battle royal at WrestleMania 17. And I think it was Bobby Heenan who said it was like, by the time this is over, we'll be at WrestleMania 18, or by the time he gets to the ring, rather.
I remember recognizing instantly that Sheik was going to win that because he couldn't take the bump.
Yeah.
I think my favorite Iron Sheik interview or favorite Iron Sheik moment is from a shoot interview where as soon as the camera pans in, he's sitting on a couch wearing a very ill-fitting Minnesota Vikings toboggan with the big gold World Heavyweight Championship that he never held on his lap, just staring at the camera awkwardly.
Is there any reason why they didn't run a little bit longer with Around the Horn with Sheik and Hogan? Why it was just the one MSG match and then he was off to the races?
I think Sheik did what they needed him to do. Backlund wasn't crazy about Hogan, and he was willing to do business with the Sheik because Sheik had a legitimate background. And Sheik was willing to do the favors for Hogan, just because Sheik was being a professional. And if you look at the history of WWF or WWF up to that point, that was kind of the norm for them. Buddy Rogers held the title a few weeks, and then Bruno Sammartino held it for 9 years.
Right.
And then Ivan Koloff held it for just a few weeks, and then Pedro Morales held it for a few years. And then Stan Stasiak held it for 9 days, and then Bruno Sammartino held it for another few years. So the history and the pattern for WWF was babyface has an incredibly long run. We break it up with a very short heel run, and then we're back to the babyface. And that was what they did. Backlund had a 5.5 year run. She got a month with it, and then it was Hulk Hogan's time. So,
and they moved him onto the money feud. They moved him onto the money feud with Piper.
Yep, with Piper, and then the Heenan family, and they started to feed him giants with Stud and Bundy and the Giant.
Yep. And somewhere in there is Orndorff. He is probably the very definition of like the wrestler who you're so pretty, please don't talk. Like, boy, if anyone who had the perfect body and desperately needed a manager, it was Paul Orndorff.
Yeah. And other than Andre, he was the guy that did the best business with Hogan. He did better business with Hogan than Piper did. Piper had the WrestleMania match with him, but Orndorff had the match with Hogan, in Toronto that had almost 70,000 in the stands. And he also had the Saturday night's main event cage match with the disputed finish where they dropped at the same time.
Christ almighty, is there a guy in that era of the WWF, like that 85, 84, 85, that has a better body than Paul Orndorff?
No.
I mean, Jesus. No, I pay to see that.
Absolutely looked like he was just cut out of stone.
Yeah, for sure. So speaking of which, Rick Martel, the model Rick Martel, arrogance, has entered the Royal Rumble. I wish he'd come out with a spray bottle, though, and just started nailing guys in the eye with it.
Yep.
And guys are just bumping out of the ring. Ah, my eyes!
Would have been fantastic.
Yes.
But Rick Martel, former AWA World Champion, former multiple-time tag team champion in the WWF, including with El Matador, not long before he turned heel. But again, on the downside of his career, and he's a guy that really doesn't have anything to do with the business now.
Well, Gavin, business, as they say, is about to pick up.
Yes, it is.
Here comes a real American, the Hulkster.
And this was where, like you said, things start to get serious because, he's got a lot of history with a lot of the guys that are in the ring right now. And Undertaker, Savage, Piper, Flair. This is an opportunity for Hulk to come in, clean house, whittle away some of the extraneous stuff like the Berserker and Virgil and guys that aren't going to win. And this is where we start heading towards an actual conclusion.
Friend here says Shawn and Martel have one of my favorite matches at SummerSlam this year. Yeah, man, like you have a deep roster here of a lot of guys that can put on great matches and sell tickets, and it's all good. The bottom's about to fall out. That's the other thing. Like going through the Mania, WrestleMania, that is one thing that Pat and I realize is just like we're so close to the precipice of the entire bottom of the business falling out.
Yeah, you get the steroid trial, and then it's. But, 93,
94. This whole operation goes to plaid.
And the Shawn and Martel match, it was fantastic. They were feuding over Sherry, basically, and who was prettier. And they had the whole we're not going to hit each other in the face thing. And it was fun.
So Hacksaw and Meat Sauce just went over the top rope.
Hacksaw and Meat Sauce.
That's right. And we have Flair and Hogan. Another lost opportunity. I will still say there should have been some courage and some sober minds that got Hogan and Flair to WrestleMania 8, but so it was not to be.
I can understand both sides of the argument on that. From just a fan standpoint, it makes so much sense.
Sure,
but it really did go so poorly when they tried it at house shows.
Well, the argument when this came up with Bailey and Pat, Bailey was an ardent defender of they should have done it, and he brought out some facts and figures for the house that they did. But if you're talking about just the match quality, how do you not have Pat Patterson sit these two mopes down and be like, "Look, stupids, here's what's going to happen. Here's what you're going to do."
Well, and I don't think it was even a question of match quality. It was just, I think it was the audience. I think that they had been conditioned that guys that looked like Ric Flair weren't world champions. They had Hogan forever. And if it wasn't Hogan, it was Warrior or Savage. So, I think that it didn't work for them, because it's a few years later that WCW runs with Flair and Hogan and does gangbusters business.
You're talking about two different audiences then, is the issue.
Exactly. It's a very different audience in terms of both geography and in terms of just what they're willing to accept historically. I think they probably saw Ric Flair as a much bigger deal in WCW than the WWF audience did.
Sure.
Because as much as I felt like Ric Flair was a huge deal going to the WWF, I lived in an area where we consistently got both NWA and WWF programming.
And as I've talked about a million times, I grew up in New York, where this blonde-looking doughy guy walks in and he's got this ridiculous-looking belt, and I'm like, who? The real champion's Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior. Who the hell is this guy? What is this stupid gimmick that he's the real champion? Like, I didn't get it. You know, I mean, all these many years later, sure, but you know, to your point, when I'm however old I am when this is all going on, I guess I was either like late junior high, early high school. Yeah, I didn't get Ric Flair. I probably would have been those people that was like, this is dumb. Like, looking back on it, I'm like, in hindsight, I'm like, oh my God, money. And then, by the way, can you imagine being one of the people working in the office the day after Bash at the Beach, and you have to go tell Vince what happened?
Hey. I'm sure whether he would admit it or not, he was watching and was aware of
it. How much did they do? We have an opportunity for this.
Going back to the point about it, it's good to be well connected as opposed to actually good at your job. Steve Kern was way past his usefulness at this point, but because he's still buddies with.
He's Skinner, right? Okay.
And he's buddies with Hulk from Florida, from Hulk's days in Florida. And so you actually see Hulk selling for Skinner in the Royal Rumble, which is the most absurd thing ever, but they're buddies.
Sure. And who cares? It's the Royal Rumble. You know, unless the whole thing is you have to look like an absolute killer through this thing. You take a couple of punches for Skinner, no one even notices unless you're really looking. So Sergeant Slaughter's in the ring now. You again, another guy who just is on that Vince McMahon retirement plan where he had a job long past, you know, even with the G.I. Joe money and stuff, he had a career long past, you know, his sell-by date.
And you know, he did a good job in his backstage role for a long time. But he and Vince had their issues in the past, and Slaughter's a good example of Vince is willing to bring anybody back if he thinks he can make money with them.
Sure, I think Slaughter's thing with Vince was the same thing as Hogan's thing with Vince Senior, which is they were, you know, the issues of them getting Hollywood gigs and whether or not the WWE had any right to that money. And here comes Sid.
Here he comes. Now we talked about Boss Man almost dying. Sarge's elimination here is equally scary in a different way.
Okay. So
keep an eye out for that. And you know, I didn't realize it at the time because I hadn't seen a lot of Sarge's older stuff when he was feuding with Pat Patterson and things like that in the early 80s. But this was a pretty typical bump for Sarge. But for a 12-year-old, it was terrifying. And I'm still not entirely sure how he pulls it off. But, you know, whatever. Maybe he doesn't pull it off. Maybe he just hurts himself, and it's one of the things he's willing to do. But
yeah. Ric Flair working on Hulk Hogan in the corner.
And the Rumble was always a good way for them to test things out and see if certain guys had chemistry together. But man, Sid just looks...
So, any insight as to why Sid couldn't like fully commit to wrestling or what his issues were? What, you know, the joke is always, oh, it's softball season, but there's a mentality that has to go along with that to where, you know, here's all this money and opportunity and fame and fortune, and you're like, nah, like, why? What's going on?
Sid, he didn't love the business.
Yeah,
and I think it really just comes down to that because there's a tale that seems too stupid to be true. But then when you look at all of the evidence from Sid's career, apparently after WrestleMania 8 and the match with Hogan and everything that went on there, Apparently, Sid didn't even realize that was WrestleMania. To him, it was just another show, and he got a paycheck for it. And that's Sid. That was all he cared about, was the paycheck. And he has said as much in shoot interviews. WrestleMania didn't mean anything to him.
I'm okay with that, but you should at least know what's going on the day you're working. Like if you're like Goldberg didn't love the business either. I don't care what he says.
Right.
The Warrior didn't love the business. I don't care what he says. But they at least knew this is a big event. This is a garage, that we're wrestling.
But again, you go back to Sid. Hey, can we start that over? No, we're live, pal. Like, he didn't even know he was on live television.
Yeah, he didn't seem the most with it guy.
Yeah, and so for him, it was a way to make money, and that was that.
All right, fair enough. And here is the Warlord. Speaking of guys that just look like the Greek gods. Oy.
He looked like his skin was ready to split open at any moment here. This was the most bloated that he ever got.
Yeah, he looks incredible, but he is not going to last long with this company, given what's going to happen in the next year or so.
And I think he ended up having some legal trouble after this, too, not long after this. But he's one of my favorite, like, random one-off indie appearances.
Okay.
He and Barbarian and Haku showed up as a trio for the Chikara King of Trios tournament one year. Yes, Warlord looked like a cartoon character.
And I loved it.
Oh, it was fantastic. It was a great look.
Well, look, when your cartoon character is He-Man, I loved it. When your cartoon character is Heathcliff the Cat, not so much.
Warlord from this era also had one of the absolute coolest Hasbro action figures.
Yeah.
Because the figure came with like the chest plate and the half mask molded on. And his action feature was like the big press slam. It was one of the cooler Hasbro figures that they made.
I know you had those LGN rubber dolls that had those things were weapons, man. You ever hit somebody in the head with one? Oof, knock them cold.
Bundy, yeah, that's a concussion.
Yeah. Sure is, pal.
Yep.
That is a brick. I got a box of those for Christmas one year. It was the best Christmas ever as a child.
Oh, they were fantastic. They were great toys.
Yep. Oh, and there goes Martel and Piper, eliminated by Sid. Sid's just wrecking house here.
Yeah, he shot Slaughter out of a cannon and then starts tending to the jobbers.
We're down to 4. We're down to Sid, Savage, Hogan, and Flair.
And again, we've talked about this a few times. Of those 4, anybody can win, and it's believable.
Right. Well, Flair just came with a running knee across Sid's back, and Sid dropped Savage outside the ring. So now we're down to Hogan, Flair, and Sid. Ric Flair goes to chop Hogan. Hogan's having none of it. He's like, "Don't touch me." And boom, into the tree of woe goes Ric Flair.
And Hulk was coming off of, I believe, back-to-back Rumble wins in this match. He had won in 90 and 91, if I'm not mistaken.
There it is. Hogan's buddy Sid just dumped him out of the ring like, oh, so much trash.
And this was the first sign that the shine was coming off of Hogan, even with WWF audiences, because they would doctor the audio for replays when it went out to syndication on Wrestling Challenge and Superstars. But in the moment and watching this live, when Sid dumped Hulk over the top, that place erupted.
Sure. Well, so Pat and I talked about this, how, yes, Hogan is this golden child and he's this iconic hero, but Hogan's character also did, we joked about him being the lusterer and all of that with Liz. Here you have another like heelish moment from Hogan where, here he is supposed to be this clear baby face, this big hero, and he's eliminated and he won't follow the rules. He won't leave. And he's starting to pull Sid over the top rope. And that gives Flair the opportunity to dump him out.
Which is, I think, brilliant storytelling, because after an hour in the ring, if it comes down to Sid versus Flair, and especially a relatively fresh Sid versus Flair, finding a way for Flair to get Sid out is going to be a stretch of the imagination, to say the very least.
Just, Bobby Heenan would say it, and Pat and I even agreed with it, because as much as like Bobby is like supposed to be the silly heel, he makes a great point. How does half of what Hogan does make him look good? Like, how is he being a hero when it's like, he's like whacking guys with chairs and crap? It's like, wait a minute, you're supposed to be the honorable one. It'd be like, Luke Skywalker, he's fighting Darth Vader and he's trying to be, an honorable hero, and Darth Vader gets distracted and he's like, shoves him down the stairs. Like, wait, what are we doing here? You're the hero. You're not supposed to cheat unless you're Eddie Guerrero.
And it's Hulk was one of the guys that reinforced something to me that I came to understand about the wrestling business and the delineation between faces and heels. It's not what you do, it's who you do it to.
Sure. Everyone will accept Hogan's crappy behavior if he does it to the bad guy.
Yeah, if it's the evil Russian or the evil Japanese guy or the evil Iranian or the evil French Canadian Dino Bravo, then it's all okay. But
those damn French Canadians.
But you get to WCW, you turn it around. Hogan did not wrestle terribly differently as Hollywood Hogan. There were still the back rakes. There were still the punches and the choking people with the shirts that he did in this match as a huge babyface. It's just that now, instead of doing it to evil Russians and French Canadians and other various foreigners, he's doing it to Sting. So,
that's right. He's doing it to Lex Luger on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're still Ric Flair has won the Royal Rumble, but he's powdered out, and and the whole focus as it is and during this era is on Hogan.
Yep.
Never mind the guy that won the damn thing. Let's focus on the angle we're going to tell here going into WrestleMania between Slappy Sid and and good old Hulk Hogan. We're in a commercial now because this is on Peacock, but I do want to let it play just so we can see the backstage celebration with Flair and the fall night. But that was fun. Everything you said about this was true, Gavin. There was a lot of storytelling there. Nary a guy in there was somebody I didn't necessarily care about, with the possible exception of the Repo Man. All right, here we are. There's Jack Tunney from Toronto.
Congratulations, Ric Flair, on becoming the undisputed champion of the World Wrestling Federation. Only to say, after due distorting the belt, the proclaiming the real world champion, I'm going to tell you, with a tear in my eye, this is the greatest moment in my life. When you walk around this world and you tell everybody you're number one, the only way you can stay number one is to be number one. And this is the only title in the wrestling world that makes you number one.
I'm just picturing he's backstage with Vince, and he was like, okay, you're going to talk about how much you like winning the title. He's like, can I say fuck you, WCW? No, Rick.
Not directly.
Was this I forget, was this around the Bill Hurd era?
Jim Hurd, yeah.
Jim Hurd, sorry, yeah, Jim
This
Hurd.
is when he wanted him to cut his hair, wear earrings in both ears, and be Spartacus Ric Flair.
What if I just say fuck you, Jim Hurd? And Vince is like, no, Rick.
Pal. One of the other things that stands out to me about this Rumble, and this certainly isn't the only Rumble that this is true of, but there have been Royal Rumbles that it's been kind of a chore to get through.
Yeah.
The year that Alberto Del Rio won was awful for a number of reasons, first and foremost being Alberto Del Rio. But to me, this match doesn't feel like it's an hour long.
No, I mean, granted, we were talking that whole time, but like that didn't feel long at all.
Yeah, it moves along at a great pace, and I really feel like you can point to this as being the best moment for so many things, for Flair, for Gorilla and Bobby, for Pat Patterson in terms of laying out a match and constructing the match that he invented. This is a Pat Patterson creation, and I think the 92 Rumble is the pinnacle of it. I don't think it ever got better than this, and I think you see the genius of Pat Patterson and his innovation shining in this match because it's executed flawlessly.
I'm wondering if in many ways one might be able to say that this is sort of the last great chapter in the 80s boom wrestling. Like, this is it, because after this, everything kind of goes downhill. I mean, granted, you have like the 92 SummerSlam, but the 92 SummerSlam sort of ushers in the new generation.
Right.
You know, between 92 and 93, I think everyone's gone. You know, Ric Flair is going to drop the title between now and, you know, between WrestleMania 8 and WrestleMania 9. By WrestleMania 9, the company looks so different, and it's in such transition. Like, in nothing else that happens in this year. That's why I'm saying, like, this might be it. Like, if you needed to find a bookend, say, when did the 80s boom end? Like, what was, you know, the high note that it ends on? It's the 92 Rumble, because it's sure as shit ain't WrestleMania 8. You know, and SummerSlam is, again, it's the Bret Hart show. And then the Survivor Series is so forgettable it should be studied. So this is a monumental event in retrospect.
And even in WCW, you know, Flair's gone. They're still doing stuff with Sting and Luger and some holdovers from the 80s. But you're also starting to see guys like Brian Pillman and Jushin Thunder Liger come along. You know, the Steiners are starting to assert themselves, which look very different than any team of the 80s. So even in WCW, things are starting to change and look very differently. And I think you're right, because here we had, you know, how many of the standouts and the main eventers and the superstars that created wrestling's boom in the 80s. You had Hogan, you had Flair, you had Piper, Savage, Jake, Kerry Von Erich, you had Ted DiBiase, Hacksaw Jim Duggan. You had all of these guys that even now, 30 years after the 1992 Royal Rumble, even talking to casual wrestling fans that are over the age of 25, they recognize those names and who those people are.
Yeah.
There are very few people in the industry today that have the name recognition of Hacksaw Jim Duggan.
Right.
And Hacksaw Jim Duggan was a career mid-carder for all practical purposes.
Can you name, without saying Steve Austin, can you name like 5 people in the 97 Rumble?
97 Rumble?
Yeah, that's the one in San Antonio. Right. Yeah, it's midgets and luchadors.
I'll say my hesitation in thinking this is my brain works the opposite of Pat's. I'm terrible with like frame of reference on time and things like that. I would guess Sean.
No, because Sean's in the main event with Sid.
Okay. Scotty Too Hottie?
A little later on. You know, let's go the other way. Who's in, you know, name 5 guys in the Rumble the year John Studd won.
Hacksaw Jim Duggan, Don Morocco,
okay.
One Man Gang.
Fair enough. But to your point, the point that I'm trying desperately to illustrate here is when you think about the 1992 Rumble, it's an all-star cast.
Yeah.
And when you think about a lot of Royal Rumbles before and after, it's a lot of, like you said, it's a lot of filler. It's a lot of mid-card. It's a lot of low-card. It's a lot of, you know, like there are fun appearances. Like I can't remember what year this was, but I remember there was the year that like Kurt Angle was in it. Not Kurt Angle. Mr.
Kurt
Perfect. Yeah. And like, it was fun to see him
back. Final 4 and people were going crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, there was the year that Kevin Nash came back and was in it. And like these are all fun moments. And you know, we hang on to them because they're meaningful to us. But I can't tell you of there are 2 memorable moments that I can think of in the last maybe 20 years of Royal Rumbles. And one of them is the one where everyone thought Daniel Bryan was going to be the number 30 Royal Rumble entrant. And poor Rey Mysterio never got booed so hard in his life.
It's the only time Rey Mysterio Jr.'s ever been booed. And the only thing that he did was not be Daniel Bryan.
You ever see a man's heart break on television?
Other than Ralph Wiggum, no.
Yeah, it was that kind of moment. And then maybe like Kofi Kingston doing the bit with the chair, where, you know, his acrobatics with the chair to keep himself from being eliminated, stuff like that. But, you know, so this will be the final thing I say about this. You know, when Pat and I conceived of the Mania of WrestleMania podcast, we were stopping at 20 because after that, everything's just a goddamn blur. You know, I can pick out a match here or a match there, and I kind of know what order the John Cena years go in, but from 20 on, it's just another, it's another show, another year, with the same guys on the roster, changing very little from one year to the next.
Yeah.
The story is from 1 to 20. And then after that, it's like, okay, it's just a thing now. And I think
Stevie Richards wins the world title in a triple threat match. And
yep. Sure. And the two guys who were supposed to be your main eventers fuck off and leave the company. But yeah, this was great, Gavin. This was a lot of fun. I'm glad we did this. And this is all in celebration of the Royal Rumble 2022. And your main events for the Royal Rumble will be Brock Lesnar versus Black Lesnar. I can't wait.
Honestly, I'm a little excited to see that match. I have no idea what the story is. I have no idea what the angle is other than
the story is it's Brock Lesnar versus Bobby Lashley. That's all the story you need.
And you know what? That's fine. I can live with that.
Yeah.
Because it's a match that everybody has been waiting on for 20 years.
Right.
And it sort of felt hopeless, like we just weren't going to get it. And I think now's the perfect time to get it because based off of what he did in Impact Wrestling and then his comeback and pairing him with MVP, Bobby Lashley is as good or better now than he's ever been in his career.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is the Flair Hogan of its time.
Yeah. And Brock, for, all the criticism that he gets of being a part-timer and being an attraction, and he shouldn't have the title because of that. I think Brock's as good as he's ever been because I think Brock understands who Brock is now.
Yeah.
We don't need 30-minute contests of endurance with Brock Lesnar struggling mightily against Jeff Hardy or whatever. The Goldberg Brock Lesnar matches are perfect. They're 2-minute spam finishers, and everybody goes home happy.
Can I tell you how much I wanted to leave Orlando after their match? Like, that was the year it was Roman Reigns and The Undertaker, and I'm like, I don't care. I've seen the main event now.
Yep.
All right,
so I'm excited to see that. And I have managed to avoid any and all spoilers for the Royal Rumble. I know there's a lot of stuff out there about people potentially showing up and the Forbidden Door and all of that. So I'll watch the Rumble, and I'll actually be surprised this year.
So speaking of which, I will be doing my 7th day in a row of podcasting because myself and the Podsman, I do have a job, people. I promise. I have other things, but yeah, the Podsman and I will be doing a live watch along alternative commentary for the entire 4-hour Royal Rumble event. So hey, I'll be with friends. We'll have fun. It'll be fine. But we will cover everything from 8 o'clock on until this thing ends. So I hope you'll join us again here on Twitch and Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. Wherever you found the live stream tonight, we'll be back there again tomorrow at 8 o'clock. When they go live on the main card, so do we. Besides that, just a quick couple of plugs here. Jesse and Alexis's trivia for video games just went live, so you can check that out on the feed or on the W2M network page or on YouTube. This past week, just kind of rip through these. We did Ronnie Adams and I reviewed The Power of the Dog, French Dispatch, and Cop Shop. Robert Winfrey and I reviewed Munich, The Edge of War. Saturday, my son and I did an alternative commentary for Beach Break, and then I put him to bed, and then I got to hang out with my friends, Jesse and Cooper, and we did the Night Flight Orchestra Aromantic Part 2. We did the main. Pat and Bailey were both busy, and they could not make the show yesterday, but I did have Stuart Lang of 401mania.com, and we talked the Attitude Years, the Austin era, 14, 15, and 16, WrestleMania 2000. And then Ronnie Adams and I muddled through the Wheel of Time, which was fun. So that's that. Next week, we've got my son and I doing a Jackass alternative commentary, which will be fun and exciting. The other Indie Cider and I, Harry Broadhurst, will be reviewing The World on GCW and No Holds Barred 21. And then finally, Chris Bailey. Myself, Evan Bevins, and Andrew Graham will be looking at Kevin Smith's much maligned Masters of the Universe cartoon. So, Gavin, I'm going to tease you a little bit. You ready? When's Casual Heroes coming back?
Probably never.
All righty.
one day when I don't work 2 hours away from home,
Sure.
And my 2-year-old is a little more independent. We've bounced some ideas around on what a possible revival and some concepts might look like. So never say never, but it's a long way in the future, to say the very least.
And what was the other one that you used to do? You know, what is it? Lex Luger Ain't No Cowboy?
The Bunkhouse Stampede.
That's the one.
That's the one. You know, if we could pin down something for me and Pat to record on a regular basis, that one stands a much better chance of coming back.
Well, I want to let you know, Gavin, that if you ever record with Pat and bring back the Bunkhouse Stampede, I will happily put it on the Radulich Broadcasting Network. All right. And if you ever want to, if you and me and Jonas and Vincent ever want to go see a Jackass movie together, I'm all for that too.
Yeah, I can watch the Jackass guys. I'm not opposed to that. Is Party Boy still hanging out with him?
He might be. Half of those people I didn't even recognize, but it is like a 20-year-old thing. So
I mean, Chris Pontius was always my favorite. So
my son and I are very much looking forward to Jackass Forever.
Same.
Yeah, so I'll have to report about how awful this was for him and how I shouldn't have brought him in the first place. I'll have a full report when it's over. All right, that's it. That's our Royal Rumble 1992 alternative commentary. Thanks for hanging out with us, everybody. We really appreciate it. For Gavin Napier, I'm Mark Radulich. Be well, be safe, and behave.